welcome back. And if you're new to my channel, it's nice to meet you. My name is Suzanne. I'm a certified astrologer. I love all types of astrology, but I see through the lens of evolutionary astrology and a modality called human design. If you want to find out more about my work, I'd love to meet you. You can visit me at gohigherfrequency.com. Today, I want to talk about a couple of the important transits that are leading us into the new moon in Gemini on May 26. These transits and new moon are our first real taste of the upcoming Saturn and Neptune cycle that perfects on February 2026, as well as our first dip into the Uranus and Gemini cycle that begins in July. First, I want to speak to the Jupiter squaring the nodes that is perfecting this Sunday on May 18th. It demonstrates that we are at a crossroads. This Jupiter degree, which is at the top of this chart set in Washington, D.C., is about ridding ourselves of superficialities to get to the core essence of who we are. The South Node that's on the ascendant of this chart is about studying humility as a spiritual practice. But the North Node, where we're headed on the descendant, our partners, it's about the importance of free will. Not everyone can be coerced into following the path that we believe is right. If we want freedom of choice, we have to allow others freedom of choice as well. Now, Pluto is moving backwards right now. And so this movement is demonstrating the movement of a process of creating inner security to be ourselves outside of any social or collective construct, to be true to our individual paths, to not be caught up in the collective delusions that are used to control us by tapping into our identities through various dogmas and ideologies. This chart carries the same Moon-Pluto conjunction that was present during the Saturn North Node conjunction the day the Pope died. And sure enough, Sunday, May 18th, the fifth Sunday of Easter, is the day that Pope Leo will preside over the Mass of inauguration of his Petrine ministry. It's the day that he's really coronated as the new Pope. The moon has moved up a degree from 6 degrees to 7 degrees, which speaks to this movement toward higher consciousness or breaking with traditions of the past to create new forms in the collective. This chart is also related to the Russia and Ukrainian ceasefire talks that fizzled out this weekend. The midheaven of this chart is the ascendant degree of Zelensky. However, with Jupiter in Ceci square to the Moon-Pluto conjunction, it demonstrates this struggle to adapt individual needs to the needs of the environment or the reality of our situation. Mercury, having just squared Mars, speaks to the stubbornness and war of words. But with Uranus forming a conjunction with the Sun, there could always be breakthroughs that forces us to shift from our very stubborn positions. Jupiter demonstrates the strategist in war. And in Gemini, it speaks to ideologies because we have to demonstrate or convince others of our point of view to rally them to our side. So Jupiter here is at this crossroads. How do we gain support for our point of view? Or how do we play both sides to try to figure out a way to convince others that they need to make concessions because the reality of the situation is such that we can't continually be at war. And Saturn in Aries that is happening on May 24th continues this story. There are limitations with our aggressiveness, with the ways that we go at war with others. We are seeing this very demonstrably in our aggressive ways that we try to root out other ideologies and cripple them in such a way that they will be finally done with. And the reality of that is, as soon as we think that we've rooted something out, something new begins. And it's a continuous cycle that is not going to be solved in war. And the Saturn in Aries ingress and this new moon in Gemini is giving us this taste of what's to come as we move further into the Saturn Neptune conjunction and the Uranus and Gemini cycle. Even though we have seen a lot of anarchist changes here in the US, attempting to dismantle our collective institutions and this movement away from our former allies, we've seen that these shifts have created more instability than anticipated. Many of these shifts have been too extreme and have left many people in our country feeling disenfranchised. And with that, there's a lot of resistance that happens, and these changes need time. That's what Saturn in Aries kind of represents. We have limits to how fast we can move toward the direction that we want to go. And the rest of the year, we will be moving into a more individual expression of this energy. We are being prepared right now to individuate as a collective. Each of us as individuals need to make a shift into a new reality that is based on empowering the individual outside of these collective ideologies. This chart demonstrates the themes of the trade wars that were initiated right after Neptune went into Aries. We had the Sun Chiron conjunction when the president announced the reciprocal tariffs. And then we had the Mercury conjunct Chiron when Pluto went retrograde. And this was when the president got his 100-day review, went on a media tour to defend his approach. And then, as Pluto retrograde demonstrated, he started to tweak his strategy based on the response. He started to review what he was doing and started to take a little bit of a break and go a different way in some senses. Now, Venus is applying to Chiron in the third house of trade in this chart. It's squaring the ascendant descendant. So we are at another crossroads here too. Now, I thought it interesting that the Sabian symbol of the Venus in this chart is called the magic carpet of Oriental imagery, or the use of creative imagination. Now, James Burgess has this to say about the symbolism. I love his site. I often refer to it when I want to look up the Sabian symbols of a certain degree and sign. And he has this to say about this Sabian symbol. It's about a way of life, refusing a hectic involvement in social competition and waste-producing overproduction, allowing for the development of unattached and transcendent understanding. The static floor of the carpet on which man's feet rests, the symbol of understanding, can be transformed into the means for great flights of imagination and super-physical perception. The period of rest from outwardly directed activity, bound to collective normality, presents the creative mind with the possibility of surveying in dreams the totality of the present day social situation, thus to see the whole. It is very much in line with our movement out of Earth, which was focused on accumulating things, and into air, which is more about expanding our mind, coming up with new ideas, and innovation or invention. Now, this Jupiter in this chart is on the cusp of the sixth house, or our governmental programs, and it's starting to form the last of the three squares to Saturn that started last year. But now it's inclusive of Neptune. So we're starting to get really serious about our resources and our disappearing resources, our dissolving resources. But the Sabian degree of Jupiter is about moving away from tribal mentality into structures that enable growth for everyone. Now you see that both Pluto and Mars are intercepted in the 1st and 7th house of this chart. So they're limited in the things that they can do because they have to think about who else is involved. And Mars is separating from a trine to Venus that's here in the 3rd house of trade. And the Sun, the ruler of Mars, is in the 4th house, separating from a trine to Pluto. So what is good for our security at home? There was a bit of a reality check around our limitations to just wield power the way we want to wield it in the world. And we see that an adjustment needs to be made, and it needs to be made for the good of the whole and not just for the tribe that we're a part of. So now we come to the new moon in Gemini, and this new moon, we're getting a little taste of the Uranus and Gemini energy. I love the description about the Gemini new moon energy from Raven Caldera. She calls this the little brother moon, but it really describes the crux of Gemini energy. And I think you'll recognize this energy because it's been very demonstrative in the United States from our president. The little brother is rambunctious, hyperactive, and mischievous, pulling his sister's pigtails and hiding dead frogs under the bedclothes. Think Dennis the Menace or Calvin of Calvin and Hobbes, which is why I have this picture of Calvin and Hobbes. It's so perfect. He is curiosity incarnate, never happy until he's found out everything that catches his eye. Fortunately, he's easily distracted. He has 100 ideas, approximately one every 5 minutes. Most of them are terrible, but he comes out with so many that by sheer volume, he manages to come up with quite a few good ones inside of a day. He's brilliant, and he delights in his brilliance. He hates having to stop moving. For him, life should always go fast and never be boring. On the little brother's moon, we indulge our curiosity. We peek inside people's drawers, look under rotting leaves, glance into our files when the doctor leaves the room. There is a nervous energy about the Gemini new moon that can affect already highly strung people to the point of hyperactivity or nervous shrieking. Concentration is difficult. Perhaps this is a better time to go out with some preferably wild and crazy friends rather than work late at the office. Now, this new moon can be a good time to focus on your mental health, especially if you've become anxious or overstimulated. It's about discerning what you pay attention to. Simplify by cutting back to the basics. Take a break from the news. Watch your mindset. Trust in the cycle of life. The moon will be out of bounds during this new moon, so it's definitely time to check in on your friends who struggle with mental health, especially people who are bipolar. Pisces and Virgo is again intercepted with the nodes in the 2nd and 8th house. So again, there is an interplay between our fantasy of what we want to happen and the reality with regards to directing our resources. With the opening sextile between Neptune, Saturn, and Mercury, there's an opportunity for us to ascend our inhibitions of thinking, our tendency to think and focus on the worst. Watch your doom scrolling. It's like our mind getting caught in a loop. It thinks it's helping us by focusing on the problem, but without action, it's simply creating a distraction for us. Don't take the media's bait if it's not going to lead you to anything active in your community to resolve the issue. Sometimes we need to embody our anger into doing something active. But let's be honest with ourselves about what is really constructive versus destructive. If it's not going to lead to a real change, disconnect. What motivates you at the end of the day? Focus on the things that motivate you into taking real action. I am personally motivated more by hope than I am by despair. If I get caught in despair, I can't get out of bed. If I'm motivated by hope, I can at least channel that energy into something creative, into motivating others to do the same. Mercury is also applying to a trine to Pluto. So we can really transform our thinking at this time of what's possible. We can't just keep getting stuck on what is wrong with the world. What are the opportunities? And how can we focus on developing the possibilities we want to see in the world? Mercury is considered the lower vibration of Uranus. So this new moon is really giving us this taste of Uranus in Gemini. Uranus in Taurus was really hard to deal with. It's not very comfortable in Taurus. Taurus is immovable. Taurus is about really focusing on what makes us comfortable and our resources. We really tightly hold on to what we have in fear of losing it. So we're not moving on to something that can really solve our problems at the end of the day, coming up with new solutions, new technologies that might be able to save us from this impending climate change that we're all facing as a collective. And so there's an opportunity here to come to a new understanding as we're facing the extremes, the dualities that we're seeing in the world, this opulence that we're seeing. And we can see that in a way that drives us toward really coming to our own understandings of how we've been participating in this duality and moving beyond them, moving beyond this tribal mentality, coming into some ascension of motivation that understands that we all don't think the same, but we can collaborate in ways that matter, that move us forward into something new, that's healthy for all of us. So there's a real opportunity for us when we start thinking about new ideas rather than clinging on to our stubbornness of what we want in our comfort in our world, in our fixation on accumulation of things, on our fixation with money at the end of the day. We're moving out of that energy, even though we're still there and we'll still be dancing there for the next year. But we're seeing that energy is really false, that idealization of money and comforts at the expense of other people at the end of the day isn't filling our spirit. And it's kind of gross. We're seeing in the world the corruption. We're coming to face with the disgusting opulence that's happening while other people are suffering in the worst ways. So we're seeing that really up close. And I think it's going to move us beyond. Now, Venus is exactly conjunct the US Sibley's Chiron, and it's moving closer to the transiting Chiron degree in this chart. Now, if you remember, the sun was conjunct the US Sibley's Chiron degree in the full moon in Libra chart. And the Sabian symbol for that degree is about competition and adversity making us stronger. But the 24th degree is warning us against overstretching or overplaying our hand. Mars and Pluto are no longer intercepted in this chart, but Pluto in the first house now squares the midheaven, and this new moon is adjusting to the midheaven. So there are some potential power struggles and adjustments that need to be made between what we want as individuals versus what the powers that be want. So as we are adjusting to these new energies, it's important to remind ourselves that we need to focus on the things that feed us in ways that create constructive actions. We need to ascend the dualities that we're seeing very clearly play out in the world. These dualities that insist that our way is the right way and really impedes our thinking because we're so stuck on our own frame of reference, on our own ideas about how we need to move forward. It doesn't give us the opportunity to come up with alternative ideas that work for everyone. If we're so focused on persuading other people to come to our side, we're not giving people that same freedom of choice that we want for ourselves. So it's about not forcing things on other people, I think, and really allowing for more flexibility in our thinking. I think this is going to lead us into ways that will come to the conclusion that if one part of society is failing, all of us are failing. Now, Uranus in Gemini really enjoys diversity. And so as we're moving into this Gemini energy, it's hard for me to see that these ways that we're ending our collective institutions, our priorities about education is going to continue at the end of the day. But we do need to reinvent these institutions. There was a way that these institutions weren't working for everybody. We need to reimagine our institutions or our collaborations so that they work more for everyone, that it doesn't get us fixated on these ideas that ban the diversity of others. So even in science, we were putting really clear kind of roadblocks into understanding, what can be possible, because science really at the end of the day is about experimentation. And then in that experimentation, if it's not inclusive of other people's ideas, we could just keep going down the same road that doesn't work for everybody. As these companies become larger, they basically bar innovation. So we need to come to some middle ground. And I think the Uranus going into Gemini is going to really focus on the strength in our diversity rather than the detriment of our diversity. We can't live in the collective environment as it stands by suppressing other people, because we need each other and we have that strength in our diversity. And so we need to figure out ways that we can make the world work for everyone so that we can save each other at the end of the day. There is absolutely no way that we can focus on whatever we want to focus on as the right way and survive this, evolutionary time. But we are going to find our own individual empowerment during this time. We are going to have to struggle to adapt to these changes and go toward ways that really work for everyone. We can't be suppressing large groups of people, creating wars that are never ending. And we have to come to some reality of the limitations, but as well expand our own thinking. So I hope this helps and prepares you for this new moon energy. Like I said, if you're high strung like me, you need to take breaks. You need to stop focusing on the media, because the media at the end of the day is now becoming more and more controlled. But it also is just basically people putting out their own ideologies and trying to get us to participate in that discussion that really isn't going anywhere. If it's not creating action, it's not going anywhere. So focus on what motivates you into action, even in your individual lives, in your individual communities, in the ways that inspire you, or out into the community where you can inspire others. So I hope that helps, and I'll see you next time. Bye.